Hello, welcome back to Perspectiva. Now, Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, has come under one of the deadliest Russian attacks in recent weeks, just hours before the US President Donald Trump is set to attend a crucial NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey, where at least 18 people were killed, including 12 in Kyiv and 6 in the surrounding region, after Russia launched a massive overnight barrage of ballistic missiles and drones targeting the Ukrainian capital. Now, dozens more were injured as residential buildings collapsed, vehicles caught fire, and rescue teams raced to pull survivors from the rubble. Now, Ukrainian officials say entire families were buried beneath destroyed apartment blocks, while children were evacuated from damaged buildings as air raid sirens echoed all across the city. Well, President Zelensky accused Moscow of deliberately escalating the conflict ahead of the NATO summit, describing the strikes as another attempt to intimidate Ukraine and its allies, where he has renewed calls for additional Patriot air defense systems, saying Ukraine has lacked enough interceptor missiles to stop the latest wave of ballistic attacks. According to Ukraine's Air Force, more than 350 drones and 66 missiles were launched overnight, with Kyiv emerging as the primary target. Authorities also reported widespread power outages across several regions. Russia, meanwhile, says it targeted military-industrial facilities and energy infrastructure, claiming the strikes were retaliation for recent Ukrainian attacks within Russian territory. Now, the attacks have placed Russia's war against Ukraine firmly at the center of this week's NATO summit, where President Trump is expected to meet Zelensky. Now, the meeting comes after Trump also held a lengthy phone conversation with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, as his administration continues efforts to broker an end to the conflict. Now, with civilian casualties rising and missile attacks becoming more frequent, pressure is mounting on NATO allies to strengthen Ukraine's air defences. As world leaders do gather in Ankara, the summit is expected to shape not only the future of Western military support for Ukraine, but also the next phase of Europe's largest conflict since World War II. Well, for our second segment, examining Russia's deadly strikes on Kyiv ahead of the NATO summit and what they can mean for the Ukraine and NATO, we're joined by Hamid Jabri, a Middle East analyst. Mr. Jabri, hello and welcome back to Asia One. So just how significant is the timing of these deadly Russian strikes on Kyiv coming just before the NATO summit and President Trump's meeting with Zelensky?
The timing is definitely more important because not just it is before the summit in Turkey, because what we have seen in the videos that there are large, long lines of people for oil in large and long queues. So there are some facts, some reports that the Russian people are struggling to find their average normal fuel for their machines. And the other factor here is that the Russian oil terminals that have been heated really devastatingly. So it is really difficult from the Russian side, but from the Ukrainian side, it is a momentum, and it can gain some aid in terms of military and even in terms of the budget from the Western countries.
Well, sir, do these attacks indicate a strategic message from Russia aimed at influencing NATO decision-making or Western political pressure?
Yes, it's definitely important because we have to consider 2 points here. The first point is that the Russians are taking seriously the shortages of the inceptors of missile inceptors of like Patriot or other air defense systems in Ukraine, because in recent wars, like what I have to insist is the Iranian war. The Western countries, along with NATO, they helped the United States to attack Iran. So the United States used lots of its interceptors, missile arsenals. So the United States itself faced the shortage of interceptors, and at the same time, they during the war with Iran, they have got some other missile interceptors from the South Korea or some other places like Europe. They even borrowed them. So they definitely face that shortage, and Russia is using this, exploiting this shortage. And in other terms, I think Russia is making some pressure, political pressure, in terms of having some leverage in the next future, probably future negotiations with the United States, as we have been seeing, we have been seeing, we have seen in last year, the same summer last year, they have been talking in Alaska, in Anchorage. But I'm not sure that they will make the same results as the last year.
So Ukraine says its air defences failed due to a shortage of interceptor missiles. How critical is the Patriot systems gap in shaping Ukraine's ability to defend its cities?
Definitely critical because, as I said, the all Western countries, mainly the United States, is facing that shortage, mainly because of the Iranian war. And during that almost 40 days of war with Iran, they lost a great arsenal of their missile interceptor, especially the Patriot system, and also the other systems that they have for air defense, and they brought them from South Korea and some other places. So it's definitely a critical situation. Ukraine itself faces that shortage. The European countries faces that shortage. So Russia is definitely taking it serious, and it's counting on it in terms of the recent strikes. So it's going to be problematic for the Ukrainian side. From one side, they are thinking that maybe the Russian escalation will make the situation more complicated, so they cannot make that leverage in terms of talks with the United States to make pressure on Putin. And in other terms, it is difficult for the Ukrainians, as it cannot be an option for them to have more resilience, because it's now 4 years of their war with the Russia, more than 4 years.
Well, what impact do repeated large-scale drone and missile attacks have on Ukraine's long-term civilian infrastructure and morale?
It has definitely tremendous effect, because during these 4 years, the 4 years itself is a war of attrition. 4 years itself is a difficult difficult period for the Ukrainian people. There has been reports that the Ukrainian people are suffering, not just the men or the boys, but even the women who lost their husband, who lost their children. So there are definitely a drop short of standards of living for the Ukrainian people. So in terms of resilience, it will make definitely more problems for the Ukrainian government to endure, to manage it. And in terms of the long-term effect, it definitely makes it difficult for the Ukrainian government to stand firm and to stand the same as it has been in the recent 4 years against the Russians. How can I say what the Russian wants? So it may be a result of the this attrition wars. So the Ukrainian government may think of some concessions to the Russian government, to Putin, but in other terms, the recent strikes helped them to have more leverage on the Western supporting countries like the United States, because we have seen that they are talking about that if the war continues, and then the Russian economy maybe will see signs of collapsing. So there are two schools here, that some politicians in Europe think that if the war continues for maybe 6 months, a year or more, there will be more Russia making concessions. So it will be in the favor of the Ukrainian government. The other school is not that optimistic. So they say that the resilience show that the Ukrainian side is at that difficult situation. So they have to consider some concessions being made to the Russian government.
But Russia claims it targeted military and energy infrastructure, while Ukraine reports civilian areas were hit. How should international observers assess these conflicting claims?
It is a normal thing that we will see in every war. The recent war in Iran showed the same. Both sides claim that they are seeking to strike the military targets or maybe energy targets, but we have to be careful about our sources like the Amnesty International, sources like the United Nations, or some other third parties like the somehow independent sources that we can rely on because as we have heard, like about 1 month or 2 months ago, there has been a strike to a school in Russia, and also vice versa. We have seen many targets that are being hit by the Russian military that are being civilian. So I agreed. It is not easy to observe that which one is true, which side is mainly striking civilians. But I think the reliable sources will be some third parties in terms of maybe international institutions, and also the on-ground news and on-ground reports that we can get.
Well, Trump previously said he could help end the war quickly. What realistic diplomatic leverage does he have at this stage in influencing a peace process?
Let's first consider that from the day, I think the days of the election campaign that Donald Trump had in 2024, they promised that he will finish the war in Ukraine in 1 day, in 24 hours. And he didn't do that. He was not successful because that was an election campaign. That was an propaganda just to have votes in his pocket. And it showed that in terms of ground complexities, it's not that easy that it can take that easy for the American side, for the European side to finish the war in Ukraine. So I don't think it is realistic to see a short-term roadmap to the Ukrainian war, to ending the Ukrainian war. And we don't have to consider and take seriously the President of the United States speech about finishing the war in Ukraine. As we have seen many things that he said about the war on Iran that proves to be wrong on the ground. So I think part of it is because he has promised in his election campaigns. And in terms of his leverage, yes, it has real leverages like the sanctions regime that it can impose on the Russian economy. It can impose more and more intense. So, and we have to also consider his political will, that how he can consider helping more the European countries in terms of standing firm to the Russian invasion of the Ukrainian territory. And these were political and also his rhetorical support for the finish of the ending of the war in Ukraine. But in terms of military aid, it is not that. I think Donald Trump is not that how can I say, that open hands to make leverage on the negotiating table. Because, as I said, during the recent war on Iran, they have lost a great arsenal of their missile interceptors, a great arsenal of their missile systems, air defense system, in terms of all their tools. So we have seen reports that the U.S. president has urged the automobile companies to enter the manufacturing system uh, of the weapons weapons structure of the country, because it definitely faces shortages in terms of military equipment, in terms of ammunition, and more importantly, as I said, the missile interceptors. So, in terms of military aid, it has some difficulty the options for the Ukrainian side. But in terms of political support, we have to consider that the recent reduction of the NATO troops, of the American troops on the European side, that is almost 1/3 of the all American troops on the European territories. So it is not that easy for the U.S. president. In terms of last year's summit that were held in Alaska between the two leaders, Putin and Trump, I don't think the United States has that leverage on the negotiation table. I don't think it has that political tools or political cards to use on the negotiation table. As I said, first on the military side, it faces shortages, and second, politically, we are seeing a more divided Western camp against the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and it shows itself in the reduction of the American troops on the European soil. And third, we have to consider that Donald Trump is from those politicians that seeks to prioritize the American interests, and it is a talking point that he said that his motto for the U.S. foreign policy will be America first. America first is not something that will be in favor of the European interests in terms of having leverage against the Russian government, and Donald Trump belongs to the politicians that are being, in terms of political philosophy, being a defender of isolationist policies. So we have seen that the recent national security strategy that was released by the United States government, in the last days of the 2025, that the American side, American foreign policy, American grand strategy is not to have foods on other continents. So they have to make progress, they have to prioritize, they have to focus on the Latin America, on the American on the Western Hemisphere. So they focus on the Western Hemisphere is the same as Monroe Doctrine. Monroe Doctrine says that the Western Hemisphere, the Latin America, is the sphere of influence for the United States foreign policy. And if this is the political philosophy of Donald Trump and the MAGA, Make America Great Again team, so the Ukrainian side cannot count more on the American side to support Ukrainians, both in terms of the military aid and also the economic assistance.
And what concrete outcomes should Ukraine and NATO realistically aim for at this summit? Stronger military support, faster weapons delivery, or a renewed political strategy?
I said, I don't see it optimistic about the Western camp being more united against the Russian invasion. So I think with the shortages in the missile interceptors and also the reduction of American troops on the European soil, I don't see it realistic that we will see some changes in the position against Russia that will be a determining factor. So maybe we will see some promises to have more military aid to the Ukrainian government or having more money to their pockets, like in terms of loans. But I don't think also that would pose a danger to the Russian side, that the NATO will be more united, or they will assist in a determining manner, in a determining level that will make a momentum for the Ukrainian side, or will make a decisive decisive situation for the Ukrainian side in the battleground. And in terms of the wars, the all-in-all war situation. So there will be some pledges to aid more, to have more military aid, but considering that shortages, it will not be a determining factor. It will not be a decisive aid in terms of the all size and the amount of aid that they can bring to the Ukrainian side. And in terms of even economy, other than the European countries, I don't think the American side will have a political will to help to assist economically the Ukrainian side. But I personally believe that maybe the European side put more pressures in terms of the European Union to have more budget for the Ukrainian military and adopting more laws, more acts to have more dollars, more budget for the Ukrainian economy, and making some impact on the Ukrainian resilience to have a long and continued war, more than maybe 6 months or more. But all in all, I don't think it will have a determining factor in terms of ending the war. So I'm not that optimistic about the outcome of the summit.
Perfect. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it. Well, that's all for today's edition of Perspectiva. Our thanks go to our guests for sharing their views on FIFA's decision to overturn the US striker following Balagin's suspension after President Trump's appeal, and for sharing their views on the Russian deadly strikes on Kyiv. Well, please, for more stories and updates, follow us on social media or visit Asia One News TV. So yes, I'm Philpot. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.